Okay, so it's 1 minute after the hour, at least on my computer. I don't know if it's on yours as well, but maybe we can start for sure. There is around 60 of us, 65 at the moment. So let me first start with the organization, and then we'll go into the content. So today we're here to look at the randomized control trials, which is, for some champion challengers, for some experiments, A/B testing, however you want to call it. It is an interesting and advanced topic where you have to have all the ducks in a row, otherwise you don't know what you're measuring and what you're doing. It's going to take about hour and 15 minutes with Q&As. Right now, everybody's on mute, so please use the chat. If you look into your menu, you should see the Q&A button in there, and be able to put there some questions. If you have any, we'll put a Q&A at the end, and we'll answer as many questions as we can. The questions we cannot answer or unable due to time, we'll put it into offline mode, and later on, you will find it answered in a published PDF version of this document in the video. There will be 3 polls during the whole time, and once we are finished, usually it happens within a week, we publish the PDF with the polls, and also we include the recording of the video with, let's say, an audio file as well. So from this perspective, those who are not here will be able to, to see it. So right now we're at the organization. We'll go through the intro, and then we start with the webinar. Once we reach the 11th hour of certain Central European time, then we move on to Q&A. And within 15 minutes, we'll be done. So let's jump right into what are we going to see today? So we'll see introduction of the participant. Today it will be myself and Marios. We'll talk about introduction of randomized control trials, what it is, where is its value. Then we'll go into practical examples. Basically, I think I prepared 5 or 6 different pilots that we did. I obscure the numbers a bit so that they are basically in different currencies and so on and so forth, so that it's not relevant in a way. But basically the results stay. Then we will talk about a little bit, I wanted to make it a little bit more fun. So there is one slide at the end of all of those, let's say, use cases or case studies, where I kind of summarizing up the key points, where if you want to make sure that a champion challenger works in your favor, that the numbers are always on your side, that what can you do in order to achieve it? Although of course it's mostly about, I want to point out the key things that you have to take care of rather than, vice versa. And then we have here a, system that works with champion challengers very well. You will see a video, you will see how to set up a very easy champion challenger in the system, because I will be also talking about how crazy it gets when you have to handle everything manually. And then we finish, we'll go into Q&A. Now, a little bit about ourselves. So I'm going to start with me. I started out about 12 years ago. I don't know if my friends from Raiffeisen are here. Oops, sorry. From Raiffeisen are here. I hope yes. Basically, I started collections with them, and since then I never looked back. So if you would have asked me 13 years ago whether I want to be somebody who handles collections, I would be thinking about baseball bats, black cars, and drives into the black woods. Yeah. And today I am thinking of call centers, efficiencies, and let's say randomized control trials. So it's a completely different world, and I'm glad to be there because there's a lot of smart and inspiring people. And I was lucky that I was able not only to be with smart people from all around the world, but also I was able to go to Asia. I was able to, look around Southeast Europe. I was able to go and peek outside, the CE to European Union. So seen, as you can see in the finished projects, you see a lot. Most of it is, 2-3 months, 6 months projects on very specific topics. So this is myself, and I'll be talking about the randomized control trials. And Marios, if you want to jump in and introduce yourself, would be great.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Thomas. So it's really nice to be here, and I see a lot of people, a lot of familiar names, and unfortunately not faces. So my name is Marios Siappas. I've also been in the debt collection software business for quite some time now, almost 2 decades. I participated as a senior business analyst and project managers in multiple implementations around the world. I have done projects mostly in the banking sector. However, I also have experience in utilities and telco industries. And the client base that we're looking at was customers with some hundreds of thousands of delinquent accounts, but also some really large customers with millions of delinquent accounts. I have been heavily involved in both early and late stage collections, and my focus has always been to, how you can use technology to improve our customers' business results. Like yourself, my experience is mostly from markets in the Central and Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Southeast Asia. So I do quite a lot of traveling, and I have to say that Southeast Asia is my favorite so far. So that's it for me.
Great, thank you very much. So, and then now we jump in, right? So first of all, let's talk about, most of you probably know A/B testing or randomized control trials, so champion challengers. But, just to recap really, really briefly. So I think the easiest concept to grasp is A/B testing, which, Facebook and Google has popularized a lot because, just doodling a little bit with the button here and adjustment of titles there and making it bold and so on and so forth, they were able to tinkle and show certain population different versions of their website and find out that, if you put something in columns instead of rows, you get a lot more engagement. You get a lot more clicks. You get a lot more buys. You get a lot more, time spent on the website. But, for us, it's a little bit more complicated, I would say. Yes, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel that dealing with real world, is a little bit more complicated. And the complication is that you deal with people. And so in terms of web traffic, you just create an algorithm where you split people in the long run into the random distribution into an A/B, and then you wait for some time and make let's say evaluation, right? And there you have some information about who's behind that IP address and digital fingerprint, etc. But in reality, you're kind of hoping that the samples are homogeneous. And if you're looking into people and portfolios and banking in collections, we're really we have our population is equal to those who enter collections. It's not outside of it, it's inside of it. And so making sure that there is the sample can be trusted, the sampling can be trusted, is first and foremost difficult thing to do. And we'll talk about it a little bit later, mostly when we get to the point of how to improve your scores if you want to, or rather what to be careful about when looking for answers to your to the questions of how to make better collection strategy. So in that regard, we're looking at splitting people into different groups, applying different treatments, and seeing whether those treatments improve certain metrics. And the metrics are also very important because measuring flow rates, measuring cure rates, measuring efficiency rates, all of those are great, forward flows, backward flows, blah, blah, blah. Then everything is a valid metric as long in the context it makes sense to the selection, criteria we actually make. And I'll talk about it at the end of my speech, how to make it win. So, but let's talk about collections a little bit. I get sometimes a question, what is the added value of collections? Yeah. And I can tell you, and I would love to have a discussions with you about this topic, because right now I'm presenting you my point of view. So if you don't agree with it, wonderful. Please, let's talk, because I love it. I love talking about this. Because for me, the difference between, sometimes I'm getting the question is like, is the cash collection worth, the costs that are spent on collections? And I'm saying, well, the cash collected, probably not, but the losses are. Yeah. And the prevention of losses is basically what we're here for. And we are running an early collection trials, hoping that the advance that we do, for example, in the first two buckets, do not disappear towards the, let's say, loan loss provision recovery. So in that regard, this is the game we're playing, and the added value is between the self-payment curve and whatever we can push out of the clients on top. Now, we'll do a poll number one. So to get you started, I'm gonna launch a poll, and right now you will see it. It's a very simple question, get you actually awake to see whether you're using randomized controlled trials in your organization. And I'm going to keep it for 30 seconds. I'm going to give you a fair warning. And once we are done, I'm going to publish the poll. And we'll see the proportions. And I must say that at the end, when we are all finished, we will add a slide behind this slide with the results, and then publish it for you, that you can download it later on. Okay, so the poll I'm going to end. There's no more new incoming. So I'm going to share the results. I hope you see it. We're saying, so some 57 people have answered, and 72%, 41 people said no to this. 28% did say yes, we do. I'm going to just quick comment. If you do not do champion challengers and randomized control trials, you're probably losing some money because things change. And although, we said create the perfect strategy, is the title of this webinar. It's actually the perfect strategy is the one that can adopt to new trends, and that can, change according to new portfolio. Yeah? If you acquire worse portfolio, more cash loans, marketing strategy is different, blah, 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 then maybe, some of your strategies don't work. And therefore, always trying something new is the best you can do for your recoveries. So, well, thank you very much. I will end and stop sharing, and let's move on to the different randomized control trials, champion challengers. So I wanted to do something. We start with simple, and then we go to more complicated and to different areas. Yeah. So first is a test we did many years ago. This test is like 10 years old, and basically we were trying to test what happens if we postpone calling in the first bucket. So we selected all the cases that entered one DPD, days past due, and we divided it into 4 groups. One group we put to calling immediately. So on the first day of call of delinquency, we started telephone communication. Then the second group, we waited for 5 days, and then we put them for calling. And the third group was we waited for 10 days after the first delinquency, and then we started calling. And this is the first time where we were able to actually measure self-payment curve, which is great because that's basically your baseline. And not many banks or institutions let you do that, because you basically have to let approximately 10% of your portfolio, depending on the size of the portfolio, go through first bucket without any stop, right? And you're basically hoping that there will be some recovery. But here, we were able to do that. And the pilot ran for 8 weeks, and this is how it looked like, right? So the numbers are adjusted, yeah, so they're not real, but let's say the differences fit. And here, what you can, how we actually thought about measuring it. So since you can go about measuring a lot of things, right? You can do cures, you can do efficiencies, etc., etc. Here, we wanted to really look at cash collected per case and average cost per case. And how did we achieve that? So then we basically started measuring the cash collected, the cash inside, not exceeding the past due amount. And we basically divided by the number of cases that were in the trial. How it worked? So for the first, I think, 4 weeks, we were selecting cases. So to have, I think, in each of the group, we had more than 300 cases. So it was altogether around 600, 700, 800 cases, because the self-payment was only 10% of the inflow. And so we had all of these cases here. And as you can see the curves, then, on the top, you have the red bump. That means that the PTP days were like set to 7. You can see that if you start calling on the first day, on the 7th day, the payments start coming in. The same thing happens on the 5th. So on the 12th, 7 days later, when the PTPs are actually being to expire, you see a big jump up. The remainder, if you start on the 10th, you don't see much of a jump. And there is also the self-payment curve with the jump on the 14th. So we see that there must have happened something. We think it's ladder. At the time, we thought it's ladder, but explainable. We need to explain it a little bit more. And now going to the results. Yeah. So let's talk about the money first. The money in. You look at the table on the right, and CCPC is like cash collected per case. CPATT is cost per attempt, and net PC is basically the net benefit. Yeah? Now we have, when we take the average added value. The average added value is basically taking the self-payment and seeing the difference between the self-payment and the net benefit, right? And if you look at the net benefit per case, we're looking at that the DPD-10, after 20 days of the pilot, there's also almost no difference. But if you do DPD-1 and DPD-5, then you're looking at 7.3 to 5.6, let's say units or euros, maybe, in the difference. And here again, we have to think about a little bit different things. It's still statistics, so you're not getting a result here. Yeah, this is approximation of the population. Hence, you have to count with the difference between, of the confidence interval. Here you can see in the net PC, I have included the bottom part of the confidence interval, this 13.6 in the brackets, is the bottom part of the confidence interval, and the 12.9 on the DPD5 row is actually the top level of the confidence interval. And these guys do not intersect. That means that we still think that these two DPD1 and DPD5 calling have different results. Yeah, it's statistically significant difference. And but it's after 20 days. So I think, and this is my guess, yeah, if we measure it till 30, 35, maybe later, we might get to a point where these converge, and it makes actually no difference whether you start calling 5 DPD5 or DPD1. So here it is an interesting result. We still think it makes sense to DPD1, but if we measure it further, would it hold? It's a good question that we cannot answer at the moment. I saw some raised hands. If I should look at it. Participants. Sorry, there's like 90 and I cannot find it. So sorry, I don't see the hands. We'll have to leave it. If you have Q&A, please put it in the Q&A in the chat. Yeah. Thank you. Now, so this is the first one. So it makes sense to start calling on the first DPD, and the earlier you start, the bigger the difference you will receive. On the cost side, we basically measured it. We put all the costs per attempt because it was a manual dialing at the time. So we had to basically cover activity, the lowest level of activity. We put all, the cost, divided it by the big 50 or 60% of the cost is still the salary of the of the individual, and everything else is there, but we actually saw it was around, I don't know, one attempt was around 3 or 4 euros or something like that. Then you see attempt per case. So the average attempt per case, the bottom part actually says that we didn't have enough capacities. Yeah. So if you're after 20 days, your average attempt per case is 0.65, then it's good because you have some self-payment. So I think after the 20 days, you actually exhausted the full, inflow. But at the same moment, the first day is 0.1. So that means that you were able just to spin or touch only 10% of the inflow on the first day. So that means maybe a capacity problem, maybe not. Yeah. Now moving on. So this is case number 1. Number 2, we wanted to see what happens if we do more than one thing at the same time. Yeah. So right now we had all the before this case, we had all the cases between DPD 1 to 30. We divided them and test when we start calling, but then we put them into normal calling queues, did nothing different. Yeah, so the start of the calling was the only difference. in the whole strategy. Here is a completely different thing. So we had cases that have defaulted, and we try to figure it out, what is the best treatment we should apply to these guys. And then we wanted to, so we had three things, right? So we could either keep on calling via call center, or we move the cases to debt collection agency, DCA, or external agency, EXA, or we do so-called personal assignment, but on a dialer. So we would just, sit senior guys on the side. We would put them on a dialer, and they would be spinning, but on personal assignment. That means they would know their cases, at least in some, let's say, elementary way, right? It's not no analysis, no nothing. It's just that there was different script, there was different spin, and so on and so forth. So it was just different approach. I call it changing the beat from, getting a call every day to somebody introducing themselves and saying, hey, I am the person you need to deal with now. Yeah. And so this was the changing the beat. And this pilot ran for 3 months. Sorry. Now let's look at the results. Okay, so if you look at it, there was some, EXA changes to the letter. So there was first we send a letter to before we send clients to external agency, and then we transferred them. So on the 20th day, so you can see that the red is actually when we train, the recoveries for external agencies. The blue is personal assignment, and the green is actually the call center. And what you can see, and this is for me an interesting result, very interesting result, is that the external agency and the control group are similar, but once we transfer the accounts, we see a bump up. Yeah, so the calls, I think it's obvious that the calls are very important to do. But what's really interesting is that if we assign personal people, personal collector that introduce themselves, and the same person called the same person again and again and again, we see there is a significant jump in the recoveries. Yeah, on the cost side, you can see actually on the table on the right side. Yeah, so again, CCPC is the cash collected per case. CPATT is the costs on attempt, basically, per case, basically. This is the bottom part. And if you look at it, then the netto is pretty good. And then you're just comparing it to the control group. And as you can see, maybe if we put the clients to external agency earlier, we might see a bigger bump. Yeah, because as you can see, the accounts were transferred to external agency. There was a sent letter, so there was lack of calls. The recovery was not so great. There is a bump up. And only after we transfer accounts to external agency, they had to work with it for some. So on the 27th, day after entering this is a vintage report, 27 days after the cases enter the collections or that stage, we see actually a continuous improvement in cash collected per case. So if we did this, we see that personal assignment is much better on the dialer. So this would, like, the thing is that if you do personal assignments, just, there could be a problem of capacity, right? So if you do personal assignment and it's a field visitor who needs to work the case, call, make sure that they have the field visit right, et cetera, then, you're not going to process as many clients. But if you keep that same, let's say, productivity or very same productivity, as you can see that, okay, it went up by 1.5, 1.6 euros per case, but it's still pretty good. It's still pretty good productivity there. And the net benefit is actually added value to the control group is, let's say, almost 19 euros. So in that regard, I mean, this is a pretty good result, and it kind of show us that making sure that you're changing the message during the collection cycle makes a lot of sense. It seems to me, this is my hypothesis, yeah, so this is not a proof of anything, but this is the note in interesting if you see it, you know. I see that right now, if you change the beat, I say it. If you change something, and the client and the debtor actually notices it, they start paying attention, right? So by other words, they call, and they become deaf to the calls. And then if you change something, all of a sudden that thing becomes much more effective. Okay. Now, next case. Right now we have pool versus personal assignment. This was a very long project, ran for 6 months. And so in that regard, we needed to check whether a personal assignment without any kind of dialer, but with analysis and everything else, worked with versus the call center. It was a 6 months long assignment, and we had a pool of clients who didn't go to field collections, but were still in collections. And there we had those who moved through the procedure. So let's jump in. Right now, we see that there is the top and the bottom are, let's say, the two different groups. The top is the pool, and the bottom is the inflow. And as you can see, they're both after 18 weeks of measurement, they were showing a very good recovery per case from the pool. And if we look at it, then the benefit was 712 units. You and I just put the different name on it that actually worked. So here we had a very specific group, yeah. So it was not the full scope, but certain cases that had to go to field visit, and we tried. This field visit was very specific. It was not the field visit we understand in Europe. In Europe, it is very thorough, 2 people, very expensive. In certain, let's say in Asia and Russia, this is usually 1 person running around having 10 to 12 people a day. Yeah. So it's a completely different story. And here, the personal assignment on the call, it was not a field visit or any kind of meeting. Personal assignment on the call with analysis and personal approach yield, much better results, statistically significant, even after 18 weeks after the fact. Now, the next thing is doodling with call center. Many of you know it, but we were fortunate enough to look at call centers with lots and lots of agents, and with the number of cases that we have to do, it was really interesting. So you can see evaluation period was 7 days, because there were so many cases that after, let's say, 1 day of calls, you had several millions of rows of data to go through. So we had to really prioritize what kind of pilots we run. We had the opposite problem from, let's say, small banks where we really struggled with statistically significant samples. Here we had the opposite problems, that if we ran it for too long, there is no technology or easy technology to actually crunch the numbers. So results. we see the kept PTP amount per case in the champion and the challenger. The challenger was better. And what basically was the thing, right? So before we had all the numbers, very simple strategy. All the numbers had to be called without prioritization, different times of the day. There were no strategy to that. Yeah. So as the call list was prepared, it was dialed that way. And basically what we did is that we would take a look at it and say, hey, we believe that RPCs, broken PTPs, and things of that nature will be better at calling. Then we look at prime times and we say, okay, we need to call more in the morning and the evening, not during the lunch hours, and beefed up the processes there. And as you can see, that we were able to bump up in 7 days 65,000 euros. Multiplied by 4, you get a monthly, and multiplied by 12, and you get a yearly improvement, but just by prioritizing numbers in the dialer. Yeah. Last but not least, we wanted to figure it out because, like, we always thought that there is a value in skip tracing, right? But in retail, it's a good question to ask. Does it really make sense on cash loans or credit cards to do skip tracing? And we try to measure that on the third and fourth bucket. And here we had this result, which basically says, yes, it makes sense. The thing is that on the first site, 149 versus 109, it doesn't seem to be that big if we had very small sample, but each of those groups had around 3,000 cases. And so the confidence interval was 0.45 or 0, like very small. And so basically it's so accurate that we can say that, having skip tracer, but the skip tracer was a collector. Yeah. So they had to find the number, they call, and they collect. It's not like a department where you find things and just put them in the database. And it's very interesting that by getting 3% of more RPCs, we're able to push the cash collected by 60%. So this is a great one. Now, making things going faster. How to make champion challenger make sure that it always wins. Yeah, representative sample and representative treatments. So if I wanted to make sure that my champion or my challenger wants to win, first of all, I would like to select into my sample somebody or some cases that are easier to collect, right? So for example, in the early collections, if you have very small amount, or the very small amount, but not the big amounts, but the smaller, not outstanding, the past due amount, right? So if you have a very small past due amount or smaller past due amount, those are very easy to collect. So I would make sure that it's unrepresentative and I get the smaller amount. And then if you do unbiased measurement, I would make sure that the measurement is efficiency, right? The cash in, or the past due amount in versus the cash collected. And with the small amounts and some good recovery, I would get very high percentage number, and I would be happy that I prevail. However, it's a bias, right? The second thing is, if you, for example, it's very hard to do some collector, call center things. If you choose the best collectors, you're probably gonna, the challenger will also probably win. Yeah. So please make sure that you select the collectors. If the collectors have to call and they are a key part of the champion and challenger, then you pick a representative sample of collectors as well. Yeah. So it's not just your sample, but it's your treatments that need to be representative as well. Sample size. If one mortgage in the sample differentiates between this the champion losing or winning, then the sample is too small. The bigger the sample, the better. As you can see, as you saw, if I have a 3,000 per group, the confidence interval is very small. So if you know cash collected per case is 10 and the confidence interval is 0.5, then you know I can have difference of only 1% and still be pretty confident that my champion and challenger are relevant, you know, different, statistically relevant. Yeah, unbiased measurement. Yeah, there's one thing that I saw one time, seen the results of a pilot. It was actually an aggregated number, and it was the total cash collected versus the total cash collected of the control group. And then so I was curious. I looked at, you know, inside of the numbers, and I saw that the champion had 2/3 of the total inflow. Of course, then on the total cash collected, they will win. Yeah, I mean this is simple. You have more cases, you're probably going to get more cash collected. So this was it was an interesting case to look at. But fortunately enough, even without the champion wasn't better, but the challenger wasn't as great as the original number suggested. Control over actions. This is one screw up I did actually before. What happened before? Hey, the problem was that I didn't control the texts inside, and the collectors were basically saying, I didn't do this, although the action suggested they did. And basically I had to throw it all away, about 2 weeks of work, because I didn't read the text inside of their actions. So if you want somebody to win, make sure that you read the text, and for the other guys, you don't read the text. So they will do something different, and you will make sure that your win. And drop-in voltage, this is an interesting case we've seen actually a couple of times, is that, you know, we are quite motivated for things to work. So we make sure that everything works fine. We try to hand things over, but then things go into business as usual, and you can expect drop in the results. So this is, there is actually a science about it called implementation science. Please Google it if you want. That actually goes into several lengths and several reasons and how to go around this drop in voltage. It's very interesting. Now, I'm going to do a poll number 2. Oh, sorry. Is an RTC common practice? Sorry, I'm just going to do poll number 2. There we go. What metrics do you measure while performing RCTs? So let's take 1 minute. So 51%, 53%, I'm ending the poll, share the results. So 34% cash collected, 45% collection efficiency. Great. So collection efficiency is great. I like it too. Depends on what you're measuring as an efficiency. For example, I give you 2 examples. If you do it on 0-1 basis, so cured, not cured, then you may need to make sure that the sample is representative. That's number 1. The same thing happens with cash in, cash out. So you have past due amount. versus cash collected. So first of all, make sure that if it's cash collected, it's not more. Like if a client pays that, past due amount, and for example, the next installment, you're not including the next installment in the, efficiency metric. But in any case, so these are the results, and I think it makes sense. I'm actually glad to see loan loss provisions prevention, as there's one person who did that, because at the end, this is the end game, and we should measure that in loan loss provisions, right? But it's very hard if you do it in early collections, then to wait, 1 year to see whether you actually did something with loan loss provisions, right? So thank you very much. I'm ending it here. And Mariusz, I have to apologize. I took most of the time, but
No worries. No worries. Yeah, thanks, Thomas.
Thanks.
So let's dive in and see how you can actually design such randomized controlled trials using the Champion Challenger functionality of a modern debt collection software. So if we move to the next slide, Thomas, we'll see that we approach this in 5 easy steps. So first of all, it is important that you are able to segment your portfolio. So be able to apply a set of business rules in order to select which portfolio you want to apply this Champion Challenger experiment. Then on the next step, the second step, you should be able to run a simulation so that you see what is the actual distribution of accounts into the segments, and in particular to the segment that you want to apply this experiment. Then the most critical part is being able to quickly and efficiently and in an intuitive way design your collection strategy and configure all the activities that needs to take place across the timeline. On the fourth step, you need to be able to create a challenger strategy, make all the necessary adjustments, and start the experiment. And of course, as a final step, you need to have in place all the appropriate dashboards and reports, which, as we've seen earlier, allows you to measure some of these KPIs like cash collected, cost, bucket flows, etc. So let's move to the next slide. What are the different types of experiments that you can expect to do in this system? And as we've seen in the previous case studies, you are actually want to be able to change the timing or the duration of collection activities, typically phone calls to your debtors. You might want to try different channels of communication with your debtors. So either you use your call center, or you may want to use a two-way digital channel interaction with your clients, or perhaps you want to drive customers to a self-service portal. Another type of experiment you could do is you might want to change the messaging in your mass communication with your customers. We have actually seen that some of our customers who made just slight changes in the messaging of SMSs, for example, have seen a very big increase in cash collected. You may want to run experiments where you actually change the PDP due dates and see, what is the impact of this. And of course, as we have seen in previous use cases, you might want to try different account handling and different prioritization of accounts within certain queues. So you might want to select a segment and apply pull or a personalized assignment. So moving on to the next one, these are what we consider the essential system entities that allows you to perform such experiments. On the higher level or on the more strategic level, you need to be able to configure your scorecards, define your segments, design your collection strategies, preferably using some visual tools, which we'll see later on. Then on the more tactical level, all the decisions made by the strategy actually feed what we call queues. So these queues then form the entry of some of the more operational entities in the system, like call campaigns, where you use the pull assignment to assign cases to your call center agents, or you might want to feed these queues into personalized assignments and either assign in-house or outsource through external debt collection agencies. Or these queues can also be fed to templates, and you might want to select either traditional communication channels like SMS, letter, email, etc., or employ more digital ones like self-service portals or two-way communication with your customers through Viber, WhatsApp, or other such types of applications. And of course, you need a Champion Challenger module, which allows you to make adjustments to all the above. So, or a combination of all the above, like changing the campaign, the call duration, or the timing of the call, changing the assignment mode, pool versus personalized assignment, making changes in your templates. Everything should be relatively easy for you to do. And of course, in the end, you need the out-of-the-box dashboards, which will give you all the insights, and you are able to evaluate the performance of the champion and the challenger. Now, if we look into a little bit more detail, all these steps. So in the first step, this is really important to be able to select a portfolio and apply these randomized control trials. So you don't want to go with a big bang approach and apply an experiment to your whole portfolio. Here you need a flexible business rule engine. So this will allow you to use criteria or metrics, as we call in our terminology. You should have a relatively rich library of such criteria. You don't need code to do that. And by just combining the criteria, you're able to define your segment and be able to apply your experiment. Now, the next step, as we've seen earlier, is you need to be able to run a simulation. So this simulation will give you an instant view of how accounts are distributed in this segment you just created. You can very easily export your results in Excel file and see what is the actual distribution. And in case your sample size is quite small, perhaps you might want to adjust your criteria. In the next step, as we said earlier, you need, if we move to the next slide, Thomas. Now, this is, as I said, the most critical step is being able to design your collection strategy. So preferably you need some visual tool to do that, some tool that makes it very easy for you to configure all your collection activities across the timeline, whether it is mass communication activities like SMSs, letters, emails, call activities, field collection activities, skip tracing, outsourcing, etc. You need to be able also to apply different exclusions to your strategy, like customer complaints, exclude low balances, or pending promise to pay, but also be able to configure parallel activities. So regardless of days past due, you might want to define activities such as PTP reminders. And all these, as mentioned before, actually put accounts into queues, where queues then feed all these operational entities in our system and perform your assignments, send your SMSs, interact with your customers through a self-service portal, etc. In the next step, what you do is you actually initiate the Champion Challenger wizard. So this is just one-click wizard, which allows you to just copy an existing champion or create a challenger from another strategy in your system or from scratch. You need to be able to define what percentage of accounts you will feed to this new challenger so that you are now ready to start running your experiment. And of course, in the next step, you need to make the adjustments in the challenger strategy. So all the changes are done through drag and drop. Changes will involve changing, for example, as I said, the timing of the call action or the duration. You might want to replace a simple SMS by a two-way Viber message. You might want to change the wording of a letter template, or you might want to change the due date of the PTP, or change the handling mode of the accounts, whether it is personalized or pool assignment. And as a final step, of course, you need to be able to evaluate the performance of both your champion and your challenger. And for this purpose, you need to be able to monitor a set of KPIs, as we'll see in the next slide. So cash collected or collected amount, the cost, bucket movement, for example, the percentage of accounts that have been queued, rolling forward or backward, being stable in the same bucket, and of course, kept PTP ratio and the PTP or settled amount. We actually provide, as mentioned, a set of out-of-the-box dashboards to show you just this. So this is just a screenshot from the dashboard, where you can see the performance of the champion of the different challengers in terms of average collected amount per case versus cost. Now, I think it's really important if we see this in action. So we have a video demonstration of this, and Tomas will just run the video, and I will explain how it works in practice.
Okay, so Mariusz, tell me if you see the video I just shared, and I'm starting it.
Yeah, sure. Just run it. Yeah, thanks. So the first step is what we call the segmentation. Logging into the system. As a business administrator, you go straight to the administration part of the system. You go to segmentation management. This is where you define the segment that you need to run your experiment. So you just create one segment. In that particular example, we create a segment for bucket 1 credit cards. So you give the description of the segment, and then using the business rule engine, you create a new business rule, you select a segment, and then using a combination of criteria or metrics, out of the box, we offer over 400 of these criteria. You select the bucket. So this is bucket 1. You select the product category. In this case, it's just credit cards for us. And of course, you might use other criteria like the due amount or total balance or any other attributes of the account. Now, you have set the rules, you run the simulation. So after a few seconds, you receive a notification that the simulation has run, and you see that in that segment, we have 1,200 accounts, which we're going to run this experiment. Then the second step, as we've seen before, is to design the strategy. So you just create a new strategy for bucket 1 credit cards. You select the timeline metric, so actions will take place based on days past due. Then you're presented with this visual tool where you simply go and add the collection activities across the timeline, SMSs, letters, phone calls. You set up the duration of the phone call. You set up all the exclusions, like exclude the low balances, the pending PTPs, the customer complaints. This can be local exclusions or global exclusions for all your strategies. You might define all parallel activities. For example, if you want to set a PTP reminder 1 day before the promise expires, you just use this metric of days until the promise of payment, set it to 1, and this ensures that the customers will receive a reminder 1 day before the PTP expires. Now you're ready to save the strategy. Then you need to link that strategy with your segment. So you simply say that this strategy I just created is linked to the segment of credit card bucket 1. You publish, of course, the results. And now it's time to start your experiment. You go to the wizard, you create a new session or a new experiment. You copy an existing champion, which is the bucket 1 credit cards. You create the challenger. You say, I want to feed 20% to the challenger. and now the system creates the challenger for you. You edit the challenger. You might change the timing of the call, so you shift it a bit earlier. You might change the duration of the call, or you could even just add additional rules on top of that. So you might say that let's do an experiment and call only the customers for which total balance is greater or equal to 1,000. So you make the necessary adjustments, you save the new challenger, you publish it. Now the experiment is activated. You go again to the wizard and you run the experiment. After 8 weeks or 4 weeks, or depending on the period you select, you stop the experiment, you go and you evaluate the results. So you could see the average collected amount and the cost for both the champion and the challenger. Or if you have more than one challengers, you see again the same type of dashboards. And once you're ready, you just say, I want to now select the winner, which could be either the champion or the challenger based on the insight you got from the reports. And that's it. This is how you can very easily do all the steps that I described earlier. You segment the portfolio, you run the simulation, you create the champion strategy, you create the challenger strategy, you run the experiment, evaluate the results, and then select the winner. So, Thomas, you could share again, I guess, the
Super. Thank you very much.
Slide.
I will share the PowerPoint again. So we have behind us the demo. I wish you could see me now during the demo. My computer started running like crazy, so I was blowing on it so it doesn't shut down. Any case, so we're at the end. There is already a Q&A. I just want to wrap it up. There is no best scenario. There's no best perfect strategy, but the perfect thing is to keep adapting. I mean, be ready for change. If you're not doing the experiments, you know, think about it. They're complex, yeah, I understand, but keep trying to think about how to do it, because it makes sense. Be aware that it's not easy. Yeah, you can taint the sample, taint the results very easily by not measuring the right things, by making sure that you're selecting the right stuff, from treatments to other things. So it's not easy, but it's once you have it set up, that's why you have the technology. That if it can, you know, if the randomization, making sure that you see the results and you get the feedback quickly, and the sample is good, and the treatments are also random and so on, then you have everything at your fingertips to do it all. Now, last but not least, the last poll. What you would like to see at the next webinar? I have reporting, restructuring, KPI, self-service, desks, or other. And I know I already, Petria, thank you, told me that this is like no multiple choice. So I do apologize. Next time it will be better. I didn't check that one. And so next time we'll do the multiple answers. So I understand that not many of you can just answer one, but you want more. Okay, so there's only 51 people, 52 already answered. Great. So I'm going to keep it for another couple of minutes, a couple of seconds. And then we'll go to the Q&A. Perfect. So we stopped at 62 people out of 90, 63. I'm ending the polling. 5, 3, 2, 1, and publishing. Share the results. So restructuring, an interesting topic for 30% of you. KPI incentive 30%, reporting 20, self-service 14. Thank you very much. this will be included in the PDF once we publish it with the video. And let's go to the Q&As. So let me pull it up. We already had a couple of answers. So I will go through them one more time, and there in the chat there were some more. So Aiden, he was say on the slide 10, calling the clients on DPD1 has a positive impact on collection, but what about costs? And my answer is that we actually measured it, and on the bottom there was a cost per attempt. So basically we decided that an attempt was the right action to put all the costs on. Yes, everything else stays the same. So by other words, we took the clients, we didn't stop any other actions. So letters, SMSs went. The only thing that we held was calls. So the only difference, only the clinical difference were the calls. And so one group went first DPD, second group went 5 DPD into the queues, and the third one after 10 DPD. That was the only difference. So the costs were, let's say, identical, except for the calls, right? And there you could see, and maybe I'm going to go into that slide. Sorry, I'm just going to jump to it. Right here on the bottom, you could see that the red goes up and up and up from day one. So we were attempting those cases from day one. And therefore, we had larger costs. So we put, I think there was 3 euros per case per attempt. So if you have 0.6 attempts per case times 3 euros, you would get the marginal costs. And here you had the marginal benefits, which was over 70 euros. So you could get that, you know, if you take that and say 70 minus this costs, you get the net benefit, right? Next marginal benefit. And I hope that makes sense for you. Then another one was for page 12, was the external agencies. That's this, whether the external agencies had a personal assignment or a call center. And they had a call center, but it was different call center, let's say. The different call center was in let's say, worse shape than the bank call center, because they received the cases, they needed like 5 days to process it. And then after those 5 days, they had like people who would be in the pool, but they would call manually. So there was no auto dialer. Yeah, so it was kind of this weird thing where our hypothesis is that we see that when external agencies start calling, even though they are not in the best efficiency, let's say, ratios, just the fact that, for example, they say that we are from so-and-so makes a difference. Yeah. So this is an interesting outcome. Now in the chat, I see that there is some additional things. Will you share the PPT? Could you record? Yes. So all of this, for those who came late, all of this is being, first of all, recorded, and the video will be put on, I think we have a private YouTube where you will not find it in the search, but you will get a link. And also you will find a link to the PDF version of this file, but also with the polls. So we'll update it with the polls that we did, the 3 ones, and put it there too, so that, and then we will notify all of the attendees, also the ones who didn't attend, and you will be able to watch it and B, just go through the pages. Okay, so I don't see any more questions. I don't see any more. I don't see any more. I see more questions. There's one more. Sorry. Thank you. Okay, thank you too. In evaluation, provisions make approximately 5 to 10 higher impact than cash collected minus cost of process. Do you suggest to make an objective evaluation speculating about the result, finishing? Okay. Well, the thing is, 30 DPD. That's exactly true. But this is exactly true. we have there 20 days because we didn't have, we didn't have more time to measure because it was the end of the project for us. Yeah. But in the reality, what you want to do is to really look at.
Thomas, perhaps you need to state the question because I don't think everyone can see the question or the can.
Got it. Okay. The question was that the conclusion or the result of the first case study, which was when do you start calling first? DPD1, DPD5, DPD10, and not at all, right? DPD5 and 1 were coming very close, but the measurement days were only at 20. I will show you, which is a very good observation. See, here you have 20 days, is the 20 days from the entry, is the final conclusion of the results. The reason why there is 20 is because we were leaving from the project, right? And we didn't have any more access to the data, etc., etc. So this was the conclusion from our perspective. However, this is a very, very good point, is that they are converging. If you see the results, they are converging. The costs are in parallel. So in that regard, you see that I believe that if we measure it for 10 more days, or maybe if we measure it till 90, if we have the time, right, to see whether it has impact on default, for example, then I think we would see that they converge and there will be no statistical difference. But this is just my opinion from the converging numbers, right? And whether that would make it like, I think there would be like between 1 and 5, there is a right time to call. It's just that from day one, there is a high self-payment curve, right? So you want to start calling when the self-payment is not as hard and not as big, right? Just to save your costs. There's anonymous. What are the most common areas where customers fail running randomized control experiments? Most common areas where customers fail. Well, it is usually 3 things. Randomization of the sample. I've seen many things where, instead of using random even Excel rand, this function rand, if you don't use it, in a nested form, if you do it just once, it is pretty good random function. Yeah. But if you just do it by first 2 numbers of the account number or things of that nature, then although it seems random, right, it's really not, because it's usually sequential, the account numbers and stuff like this, and therefore you're getting, you might be getting overrepresentation of certain vintages, right? So cash loans from some marketing, times or whatever, or when you didn't have certain rules on risk, etc. So it's really tough. So this is one part. Second part is making sure that the treatment is also somehow random. So not just giving, not just picking the right collectors, but kind of randomizing also the collectors. Usually it's like, I'm going to take these 2 or these 3 guys, they are really good, and they're going to do the pilot. Well, then you're measuring the people, not the treatments, right? And the third one is usually then measuring cumulatively. That means, one collected 3 million and the other one collected 2 million. And it's not the driver, right? You have to do it per case, or you have to do it efficiency per case, or, things of that nature. It needs to be really the efficient measuring. It needs to be something sensible. And then if maybe in the measurement, usually the costs are not considered very often. Usually it's like, okay, the result is, 30% better on this one, so we'll just go with that. So these are the three things. Now, mentioned about daily capacity for field collector. Asia versus Europe, 10 to 12 Asia approach. What is your view on Europe, Cape? So in Europe, what I see, well, it really depends what do you expect from field visit. I always start with this. This is a great question because, for example, in Asia, you don't expect to have too many pictures. You don't have evaluation of the financial situation. You don't try to assess the conditions where they live. And there is not much like the reporting of all of that and the pictures and whatever you're trying to do here in Europe is not as strict in Asia, right? So if you do cash loans, you don't need to do the house checks and all of that. If it's a mortgage, it's a completely different story, right? And for cash loans, you need to have minimum 12 field visits per day, and it needs to be fast. It needs to be and also without GDPR and secrecy, you can talk to the neighbor or I remember in Vietnam, if you go inside of the block houses, there are many sheds, right? So you go to the next shed and say, hey, the guy that lives over there, and they say, yeah, can you tell him that I'm on this number, blah blah blah, right? So you talk to completely strangers, and you get it somewhere, you get the cash collected there. So it's a completely different story. But in Europe, if you want to do this quick, I stand on your door, knock on your door, somebody wants to see it, I think we can get to, in cities, we can get to 7, 8, 9 a day, but it's not with all the documentation and 2 people with, just to make sure that everything is properly documented and done. But if we're talking mortgages and negotiations, then we're talking probably 5 or 6 maximum. And we're talking maximum. Yeah, needs to be very well planned. Okay, I hope I answered that question. Now in the chat, I think we're overrunning quite a lot, so I do apologize. I'm going to take 1 or 2 more questions, and then I'll have to leave it for for offline, if you don't mind. Once you made champion, challenger, champion, how often it's proper to do it again? Very good. That's a great question. I think it's always good to do something different. So once you have I think it's good to have, in the agile world, I know people from Europe are hate the word agile, so I say it anyway. In the agile world nowadays, you have this backlog, right? And I think it's a good. Let's forget agile. Yeah? Just having a backlog of things you want to change is a good thing. So if you have a new champion, that just improved your collections by percentages, you should have a list of an Excel of 5 additional things that you want to test, again or new, right? And that is what I would recommend. It's not retesting whether this is better or not. If the results are close, yeah, you might just choose not to implement the challenger, right? If you feel that it's not conclusive, but if it's conclusive and you see the better results, there's no reason why not to switch. That's number 1. And number 2 is then saying, okay, we can rethink it, but the hypothesis that if you have a dialer and then you switch to personal assignment, will actually switch to continuing with the dialer is going to be better, then you can keep on 10% of all the cases in the dialer environment. For first 2 buckets, you just put third and fourth bucket, you keep it in the call center, and you will always see how they perform against everybody else. So you can have this shadow process where you can always test your hypotheses continually. However, it's not necessary. I would switch, very specific segments to, for example, personal assignment. I would start calling somewhere between 3rd and 5th DPD. I would probably make longer analysis of the results versus costs. Somewhere between 3rd and 5th DPD, start calling. Maybe higher spin. I would test that again, and then I would start thinking, okay, so what happens if I have a very low amounts, and I will, message them through an app, banking app or iBanking or whatnot. Does it have the same effect as SMS, for example? Yeah, things of that nature. That could be a completely different test you can run and improve your results there. I hope I answered that question. Perfect. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time, your questions, and I hope to see you and hear you soon. To whom I know, don't know as well. And
Thomas, perhaps you can share the last slide also for with the contact info.
That's very
while
good.
we're leaving.
Yes, while we're leaving. These are the contact information for us, and we appreciate you being here. Until the next webinar or personal meeting, have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Have a nice day. Thank you.